Debts between gods and the ambitions of one who perhaps should have known better. They say a man can be judged by the standing or power of his enemies. It could therefore be determined that the emperor, called anathema by the powerful, malign warp entities who fashion themselves gods, is very dangerous indeed. Yet if the emperor of mankind was so mighty, and his millennia-spanning strategy so flawlessly planned as many believe, why did it all come crashing down in such spectacular fashion? There is actually a number of very clear reasons why, some of which were entirely preventable, and others which almost seem preordained to occur. If you did miss our previous video about the Emperor's overarching strategy for galactic conquest and his plans to bring about mankind's psychic ascendancy, then make sure you go check that out, because today we're expanding on this in a massive way. As always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, guys. It helps our young channel grow into a global community, one which you can become a part of from the beginning. It also ensures you'll receive notifications of all the new lore we post, such as this, and this, so you're always in the know. Now, we've already discussed the overall strategy the Emperor conceived in regards to his conquering of the galaxy and expedited evolution of humanity. However, the reason it all came to ruin was not just because of the actions of corrupted sons or even the meddling of evil deities. Let's discuss what was actually to blame for mankind's fall from grace, but we're also going to dare touch on whether mankind as a species was better off without the Emperor's meddling. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get into it. Now, Phase 2 of the Emperor's three-phase plan to conquer the galaxy was never completed. It is well known that he failed in conquering the galaxy and tidying up any loose ends. We do know he was extremely close, but his final path to victory, one he'd paved for centuries, was denied to him. Let's first look into why and how this occurred, before we broaden the scope of our considerations a bit more. Make sure you let me know your thoughts in the comments as we go, because there's going to be some controversial ones here. Of course, we know the reason that the Emperor's crusade wasn't successful is ultimately due to the Chaos God's meddling. This obviously began when the corrupt religion of Cultus, actually one of Chaos worship, was permeated through the Wordbearer's Legion by Erebus, eventually turning his Primarch Lorgar, and the rest is history. But rather than this scheming being the cause, this event or conspiracy is actually more so a symptom. But of what? A neglected family run to ruin? A lack of diligence by one who should know better? Or something far more insidious? The answer is all of the above. A popular point raised over the years is the ignorance of the Primarchs when it came to the malign influence and perhaps more importantly, the true nature of the Chaos Gods. Should the Emperor have elected to trust his sons with this knowledge? Do you believe it would have changed their reactions when tempted by the Pantheon? For instance, consider Lorgar, perhaps the most ideal candidate to discuss how one of the Emperor's warp-touched sons can become beguiled by the Chaos Gods and even manipulated by their followers. Do you believe, and let me know in the comments what you think, if the Emperor, from the very beginning, had taken his Primarch sons into his confidence and informed them of the true nature of chaos, and even were he to still reprimand Lorgar at Monarchia for worship, then, when the true agents of discord in Corpheron and Erebus attempted to broach the subject of Colchizian dark pilgrimages with Lorgar, he wouldn't have immediately been suspicious of their intent? I suspect, even though Lorgar was at an all-time low following the events of Monarchia, that he likely would have slapped their heads clean off their shoulders. But conversely, if the Emperor had instead taken Lorgar and his brothers into his confidence rather than shielding them through ignorance, it's entirely likely that Lorgar, now understanding the threat of religious devotion, may have aspired more towards the role of orator or delegate rather than zealot. Now, many of the traitor Primarchs were influenced gradually or otherwise tricked, both deceptive tactics known to be employed by the servants of chaos. Lorgar, in his yearning for something greater than himself to attach his adoration to, Fulgrim by the corrupting influence of a demon-possessed blade, Magnus through the deception of Tsench itself, and even the Alpha Legion twins through believing they were saving the galaxy from chaos. In short, it's a mismanaged disaster. But this isn't the fault of the Primarchs. To be honest, it's the Emperor's. It could have been a lack of trust, possibly even a lack of care for his tools' longevity, or maybe again, it was a decision to protect them through ignorance, which drove the Emperor to not inform all but one of his sons about the true nature of the warp. Personally, I don't subscribe to the concept the Emperor caused the heresy on purpose, or that he viewed them only as tools. The Emperor had worked tirelessly, longer than anybody can truly appreciate, just to reach the heights of the Great Crusade. You can't tell me that someone nursing such a grandiose plan, with that much care and devotion, would then just allow half his sons to turn traitor and duke it out with the loyal ones on the off chance they'll kill each other. Also bear in mind that the Emperor had begun to refer to the Primarchs as his sons as soon as he'd discovered they survived their scattering by chaos, and before he'd even set out to locate them. In the End of the Death Part 2, he had to cast the more compassionate, or some may even say human, parts of his soul into the warp, just to ensure he'd be callous enough to deal a death blow to Horus, and thereby end the Siege of Terra. Again, personally, I don't believe the Emperor of Mankind would flippantly cause the greatest galactic civil war since the War in Heaven, whilst being so close to achieving his ultimate goal. Perhaps the greatest example of the Emperor utilising ignorance to shield his sons from the influence of chaos is Magnus Foley. In the use of tutelaries, the Thousand Sons were openly consorting with demons. Of course they were tutelaries. They were literally tutoring loyalist Astartes in the secrets of warp-fueled sorcery. Through electing to shield his sons with the dull, bludgeoning force of ignorance, the Emperor would inevitably undo absolutely all his efforts in building a framework to support his end plan. Of course, we know this is during the moment Magnus relayed news of Horus's betrayal to the Emperor. Magnus accepted power from Tzeentch itself in order to breach the Emperor's latticework shield, which protected his ultimate work, the Webway project. When Magnus forced his way through this protective network, he destroyed irreplaceable, ancient archaeotech, slew thousands of specialist scientific personnel, with many hundreds of others being driven insane or grievously injured. The true irony of this destruction is that the truth which affected Magnus so greatly, that which drove him to accept the executioner's blade in the form of Lehman Russ's invasion, and flaunt the Edict of Nicaea so brazenly in front of his father, was a truly trivial matter compared to the destruction he brought about in the process. Everything, absolutely the Emperor's sole purpose for millennia, had been undone by Magnus in that instant. In one fell swoop, Magnus had destroyed mankind's ability to ascend to a psychic species within the Webway. But can we truly blame Magnus? Really, by electing to use the method he did in reaching the Emperor, besides expedience, was also an effort to prove how valid the use of warp sorcery was to the Imperium. Yet still, if Magnus was not ignorant of the Pantheon, would this have occurred? They likely wouldn't have even had to have been a gathering at Nicaea. You can bet the Emperor knew the Thousand Sons were meddling in far more than they were letting on, but still he allowed them to continue in their sorcerous practices. The Emperor is no fool, however, so what's the actual reason the Emperor behaved in this manner? Well, it's actually the same reason he would trust his sons, whom he barely knew, with thousands of superhuman soldiers to represent him on the galactic stage, but not with the truth of chaos. The answer is expediency. You see, the Emperor was always in a rush against time, and he knew the powers of chaos would seek to undermine his efforts. He wanted mankind safe within the Webway before the Chaos Gods could corrupt his beloved human species. But again, he only has himself to blame. It seems that even a being as close to godhood as he is not immune to acts of hubris. Unfortunately, being affected by negative traits such as this, whilst wielding your entire species' military and civil power, leads to far more cataclysmic events than any simple, mundane mortal with aspirations. And so it is a fascinating aspect of the Imperium, one which likely plagued the Great Crusade at every step, is actually the nature of the Emperor himself. With the Horus Heresy series now at a close, we're very much aware that every one of the Emperor's close supporters from Terra abandoned him prior even to his pacification of the Selenar gene cults on Luna. Everyone, that is, other than a sigillite. This fact speaks volumes of how either horrified or foolhardy the people who knew him best thought he was becoming. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. If a close friend or idol of yours was to announce that he intended to force humanity's evolution, a goal which necessitated countless acts of genocide, would you stay believing that friend is stable-minded enough to continue being a friend, let alone to aid in these endeavours? Of course, this is diluting a situation which took centuries, if not millennia, to slowly come to fruition. However, the point remains the same. The Emperor, from his time as an unassuming Terran citizen to burgeoning warlord, then Emperor of mankind, has always countenanced the direst of actions for what he believes to be the greater good of his species. So our final point. We've discussed how the Primarch's ignorance of chaos likely contributed heavily to their susceptibility of corruption. This, and the fact that the Emperor of Mankind's own hubris, rushing what was essentially the greatest galactic undertaking in hundreds of millennia, also left his entire species at the mercy of the violence his hubris caused. Our final point, however, is perhaps the most plainly ridiculous of all, and that is bartering with the Chaos Gods. It is firmly established within 30k lore that the Emperor knew well the threat of chaos, their malign influence, the fact they cannot be even openly combated upon the material plane, how susceptible mankind were to their ultimately damning promises. But if this is the case, how can anybody at all justify making a pact with them? We know that some kind of accord or deal was formed between the Emperor and the ruinous powers during his visit to Moloch. Could you imagine making a deal with the devil with the plan to stab him in the back before your payment was due? I don't care what your ambitions could achieve. If you have to barter with the ultimate intergalactic evil to achieve it, then are you really making the wisest choice? He was in a rush, making an effort to eradicate any threats to mankind across the galaxy, whether they be xenos, chaos-corrupted peoples, or just general secessionists, because the Emperor wanted mankind in the webway soon as possible, so they couldn't be corrupted by chaos, whilst the species as a whole underwent its psychic awakening. To achieve this, the Emperor utilised tools such as genocide, and even bartering with powerful entities who are perhaps the most evil beings across all time and space. Let me know if you believe it was worth it though. Could he have pulled it off if more went his way? Were the Emperor to elect to completely bring his Primarch sons into the fold proper, informing them of the threat chaos posed, this would have explained a lot of the musings and even doubts his Primarch sons had about the rushed nature of the crusade. Not only this, they would have been mentally fortified against the ruinous powers. It matters not how mighty or powerful one is, when it is your mind and even soul which is being assaulted. Perhaps we give the Emperor too much credit. I've even seen in the past some 40k forums trying to claim he is in fact omnipotent, but when we truly begin to dissect his decisions and even character flaws, the man who had become a god seems just as susceptible to the same flaws of character any other human being is. Whilst I don't believe we can equate the Emperor's nature to some of the uncaring deities of the Greek pantheon, for example, my opinion is the Emperor certainly wanted what was best for mankind. But maybe, and this could be quite controversial, but is it possible that he just wasn't capable of pulling off a scheme of such magnitude? Have we ever questioned what would have occurred were the Emperor have chosen to not create the Primarchs and launch a galactic campaign? He claims that were mankind not allowed to reach their psychic awakening in a location free of chaos's ability to corrupt them, that chaos would have consumed the galaxy. This isn't too dissimilar to the future foreseen by the Xenos Council known as the Cabal. Do we truly believe the chaos-plagued futures that the Cabal and the Emperor both were trying to prevent were even going to come to fruition? Perhaps by meddling with the present, they themselves brought about what they were trying to avoid. Since the outstart of the heresy and for the next 10 millennia, the entire galaxy has been the domain of chaos. Constant war, oppression across entire species on a scale we of this era could not even comprehend. We can only speculate on whether the Chaos Pantheon would have been capable of the far-reaching atrocities both the Cabal and the Emperor sought to prevent. However, what we definitely know is that what they have achieved has no doubt been far easier than it would have been otherwise were they not to have access to so many corrupted Astartes. Ultimately, it's perfectly clear as to how and indeed why the Emperor's great plans fell to ruin, even under his diligent gaze. The Emperor made a deal with creatures of pure malevolence, and one of two things occurred. Either he reneged, cheating them, and suffered for it, or when it came time to pay the agreed upon price, he refused, again suffering, but also causing mankind's very species to buckle under the weight of his hubris. Do you think it's possible that the Emperor was merely being played by the ruinous powers into bringing about the current 40k era? Make sure to let me know what you think in the comments section. I love reading and replying to your thoughts and theories. If you like this video, I think you'll love these ones. You can find them linked in the description or over on Titan Wargaming. You know we can post videos about all the new lore of 40k as it's released by Black Library. So if you don't want to miss anything, smack that subscribe button and even the notification bell. That way, you'll always be in the know. Our Discord community is slowly beginning to gain traction and we have some really stand-up characters in there. So if you'd like to be with us from the beginning, come on over by following the link in each one of our videos' descriptions. We love to chat about lore, reading recommendations, and even the hobby itself. Come over and show me what's on your painting table now. Our Patreon link is also available should you feel generous enough to join. It is my hope that one day I can take a step back from the long hours I currently work whilst making content to concentrate on YouTube primarily. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the comments or our Discord. Until next time, take it easy and have a good one.